Now, a little while ago, I created a cake topper tutorial showing you how to make a little elephant to go on the top of your cakes. Now, since then, I have enjoyed so much seeing all the pictures of your own versions of this topper. So I thought I would do another animal that you can add to the collection. So I'm going to be showing you in this week's video how to make this cute little lion cake topper. Okay, let's get started. So the things I'm going to need in order to make my lion figure is, first of all, I've just got my gum paste or modelling paste. Now I've actually combined normal white fondant with my gum paste, and I've mixed 100 grams of white fondant with 50 grams of gum paste or Squire's floral paste. Now what you can do if you haven't got any gum paste is you can just add some Tylo powder to your fondant. You just want it to firm up a lot more than regular fondant on its own. I've then got a small amount of black fondant and a little bit of white. I've got my modelling tools and my craft knife along with some paintbrushes, some edible glue. I've got a piping tip, so a large piping tip, and I'm just going to use this to cut out a large circle. I've also got some edible tint. I've then got my rejuvenating spirit just to turn my gold into a paint. I've got my rolling pin and a cocktail stick, and lastly I've got some cling film or plastic wrap so that I can use it to prop up part of my lion whilst he dries. Okay, so for the main part of my lion, so his face and his body, I've got a large ball of my modelling paste. Now I've coloured this with some light brown and also some ivory to get this darker ivory shade. Now I'm going to break off just under half, and this ball measures 50 grams in weight. So I'm going to roll this into a ball so that it's nice and smooth on the outside. So I'm just going to slightly flatten that down and just taper in that top. Now on the bottom, I'm also going to bring this down into more of a point. Now coming down around a third of the way, I'm just going to put two little dips in the side. And we're just trying to create the front where his mouth and his nose is going to be. Just coming around in a slight arc. I then want to push on the front just to flatten that down into the point, just bringing gum paste up so that we're starting to get a raised area. Now on the sides, I'm going to push in slightly just to create the bridge of his nose. Flatten that down. Also flatten down his forehead, creating an area for his nose to sit. Now if you're finding that your modelling paste is sticking to your work surface, you can just pop down a small amount of corn flour. For his nose, I'm going to take a really small ball of black fondant. Now this one measures around 1/2 centimetre, and just pinch that on either side. Create a triangle, turn that on its side and just push down, and that's going to give us the shape of his nose. With some edible glue, I'm going to pop that on the front. Now using my really small ball tool, I'm going to go in on each side, creating some nostrils. Now for his mouth, I'm just going to use my Dresden tool and come down in a straight line, and at the bottom create an upside down V. Just turn that up at the corners. For his eyes, to make him look quite cute, you want to keep them quite far apart and around halfway down the face, and just create two openings. And then mark on just 2 eyebrows. Now into the eye sockets, I'm going to roll 2 identical small balls of black and just roll those so they're oval shape. Now with a very tiny piece of white, so just using my craft knife very lightly just to cut off tiny balls, I'm going to roll those into the palm of my hand, and using the paintbrush with some edible glue, I'm going to pick them up, adding 1 into each eye, and also just 1 on the edge of his nose just to look like a little light spot. Now for his mane, I did another ball of modelling paste, and this one is slightly orangier than the colour we've used for his face, but I'm going to take a very small amount of that and roll this out, just tapering down both sides until they're really thin. I can then cut off 2 pieces from each end, which are around 3 millimeters in length. and use these as his eyebrows. To finish off his face, I've got a dusky pink edible tint and just paint on some rosy cheeks. Okay, so bringing back in the modelling paste for my lion's mane. This ball weighs around 40 grams and I've used a combination of yellow, orange and a light brown. Now roll this out, keep it nice and circular. So once it's around 2 millimeters in thickness, just use my fingers, taper that down into a point at one end. So what we're looking for is when we place his head on the top, for his mane to come out around 1 centimeter from his head. And using my Dresden tool, just go in and create some texture. So just going all the way around the edge from the middle out, just pulling away. And once I've gone all the way around the edge, I'm just gonna work from the center out. Now, in order to place this onto his head, I want it to go all the way around the outside. Take a circle cutter, and I've just got a large piping tip here. I'm then going to use my craft knife and just bring that into a point at the bottom to mimic the shape of his face, and also just cut down from point to point. Now, because my modelling paste is quite soft and we want it to dry, I want it to rest on top of my plastic wrap. If you haven't got plastic wrap, you can also use some tissue, but it's just going to raise the modelling paste up. Then just pop some edible glue all around the centre of the mane. Then place it around the side of his head into place, and when we get to the bottom, if you do have any excess, I'm going to trim that off and bring the 2 points. Now going around the edge, I'm going to use my Dresden tool and just lightly push in, just gluing that gum paste onto the side of his face. Now to give it a more cartoony look, in a few areas I'm going to cut into that, taking out a few triangles with the appearance of hair. Now I'm going to go in with my fingers and just shape the mane. So just pulling on some parts, resting on that plastic wrap just to create some movement. Now I'm going to leave that plastic wrap in place until his mane has dried. But at this point I'm going to take a cocktail stick and just go in underneath his mane. Now at the top of his head, I want to create 2 ears. So I've got a small ball of the modelling paste, which is the same colour that we used for his face. Squish this down slightly into an oval shape and flatten that. Cut that in half, and using my small ball tool, push into the centre. I'm going to straighten that up, both of those, and use some edible glue just to attach them. Now to create some hair on the top of his head, I've got a small ball which is the same colour as the colour that we used for his mane. Now this one is around 1/2 centimetre in diameter. I'm going to taper that down and use my Dresden tool to put some hair marks in there. And I can attach this. Now I'm going to take 2 other pieces. So one that's around half the size, again taper that down, and I'm going to create one more piece which is even smaller. Now I've left this space here because I'm going to add a crown. Now for the crown, just got a small piece of gum paste. Now this one I've just coloured it yellow, but you can start with white. So I'm going to roll that out until it's around 1 millimetre in thickness, and I want to create a straight line at the bottom. Come up on one of the sides. Now I'm going to cut out some triangles so that I have a half triangle here. I then want 3 full triangles and another half on the other side. Pop in some edible glue just onto one edge. Then use your paintbrush and just pull that around, pull those points outwards, and I'm going to leave that to one side to dry so that I can paint it in some gold before I add it onto my lion. Okay, so for his body, I'm going to be using exactly the same colour in modelling paste as I did for his face. Now I've got 5 different size balls. The first one is a slightly larger ball, and this one weighs 35 grams. It measures around 1.5 inches in diameter, and I'm going to use this for his body. I've then got 2 slightly smaller balls, so these measure 8 grams each, and 2 balls which are half the size of these ones, so these measure 4 grams. So starting with his body, I'm going to roll this out so that it's nice and smooth. And I want to taper this down. Now I want quite a thin, slender body. Flatten out the bottom. Now on the top, I'm going to take another cocktail stick and just push hole in. This is just so that when it dries, we can slot the head onto the body. Now I want to keep it quite flat on that front so that his mane isn't going to get in the way. And just push 2 grooves on the front where his front legs are going to sit. Now for his foot, I'm going to take one of the larger of the 4 balls. So just pushing my finger in to the center. Now with the larger end, I'm going to push that on my work surface. It gives us this little foot. And take my craft knife and just cut 2 grooves into that. Now I can pull these out. I'm going to round that off at the bottom. Now on the front, I'm going to take my ball tool, pop in a larger dent in the center and 3 smaller ones around the outside. Now bringing back in my body, I want to attach this to the side. Now with my Dresden tool, where it meets the body at the front, pull in, create a bend so that it looks like his knee joint. Now I've done exactly the same for the other side, but with the bend on the opposite side. So I'm going to push that into place. Now for his front legs, I'm taking one of the smaller balls and I want to taper this down so it's got more of a point on one side. Push on the bottom and use my Dresden tool just to come round the front, which is going to create a little paw. I'm going to push in, create pause. Now I also want this one to have a slight bend. So at an angle, I'm going to push my Dresden tool in. I can then push that onto the front. Now you might need to just move his leg out slightly to give it some space. And I'm going to bring the top round so it comes from the side of his body. Now I'm going to do exactly the same for the other side. So I've got an identical leg here and just taken that bend in the opposite direction and then place that on the front. Now I'm just going back in with that Dresden tool, just making sure that everything is nicely stuck down. So just combining that gum paste a little bit more. Now I am going to leave his body and his head to dry a little bit more before I add them together. And the reason for this is because his head is around the same size as his body. If I was to place it on now, because of the weight, it would just push on his body and make that modeling paste just sink down. And this is where we end up with quite a short, stumpy body. Now, what lion would be complete without his tail? So I've got 2 small pieces, one in the same color as his body and one in the same color that we created his mane. So I'm going to roll out the lighter shade until it's around 2 to 3 millimeters in thickness. Attach this, create a small hole in the back of his body and just push end of that tail around, bring it round and rest it on his knee. You can trim that off. Now taking a small amount of the shade that we used for his mane, taper that down, add some hairlines. Now I'm going to use my ball tool and this is the small end and just put a hole in the bottom. This can then slot onto the end of his tail, so just fixing that on. To add a little bit of shadow and shading onto my lion, I've got a small amount of chocolate brown edible tin and also some egg yellow. Now I'm going to mix those together and with a small fluffy brush run this around the inside of his face, just coming out from the edge, behind his ears and across his hair. With the brown I can also go in just inside his ears and just where his arms meet his body. And where we've got those bends in his legs. If you want to make his crown look a little bit more regal, then I've got some Radiant Gold edible tint by Sugar Flare. Now I'm going to mix this with some Rejuvenating Spirit, and by mixing these together you just create a nice thick gold paint, making sure that I go on outside and the inside. So we've got our little crown which is now all ready to add to the top of our lion's head. Popping that into place between his ear, those pieces of hair. So we're now going to take the body of the lion and his head and combine them together. So I'm going to take a small amount of edible glue and just put that at the top of his neck. Take his head and just push it into place. Now I've left the body and the head for around an hour, so they have slightly firmed up, but they haven't gone completely solid. And the reason for this is so that you've still got slight movement in the pieces to join the two together. Now I did end up taking it off around 1/2 centimetre from the top of his neck, just so I could push it down a little bit further so that the bottom of his mane just sat between the two front paws. So here we have the finished lion. Now this lion would be perfect to go on the top of a birthday cake, maybe a cake for a baby shower, or even a christening cake. I really hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial and would enjoy making your own version of this lion. If you have enjoyed the video, as always, don't forget to give this video a like. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, then you can head over to the Cakes by Lindsay YouTube channel, hit the videos section where you'll find a selection of other tutorials. Now I'll also put a link in the description below to all the tools that I've used throughout today's video, and also links to my social media in case you want to follow me there. So until next time, bye!